Awesome. Thank you so much for the intro. And I am excited to be here and see everybody in the chat. My name is Lauren. I will be presenting to you today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And just a quick reminder, if you joined recently here in the chat, I am going to ask for some conversation in the chat as we go today. And so if you just double check when you're typing, when you say two, go in there and choose everyone. Your default is going to say host and panelists, but we want everybody to see what you have to say. Unless you don't and you only want me and Savannah and Arlen to see, then you can leave it host and panelists. But go ahead and make that everyone, and then everyone will be able to see that. All right, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and we will start talking about AI. Savannah, can you just give me a thumbs up if you see the awesome. Thank you very much.
Good to go.
Okay, so today we are going to be talking about bridging the gap, clarifying your AI policy for students. And so right from the outset, what I want to say is whenever I talk to educators about AI, there are already very strong opinions. Oh, I just saw a question. Does your picture show? No. So I cannot see any of you. I can only see what you're typing in the chat. So your cameras are not on. But great question. But yeah, so when we talk about AI, there are always a lot of thoughts and feelings about this. Some of us are already using AI every day. Some of us are using it in the classroom with our students, and some of us are not using it at all and don't want to. And that's totally fine. But what we're going to talk about today is getting clear on what the policy is for your school, and engaging a little bit more with how we're communicating about this with our instructors and our students. So that's where we're headed. Before we get there, just to give a little bit more of an introduction, again, my name is Lauren. I work with schools all around the country, but specifically in Illinois. And before I joined the Social Institute, I actually come to you from the land of higher ed. So I was a coach and teacher for about 11 years, have a lot of experience working with students of all ages, but definitely spent a lot of time in higher ed and have a background in mentoring and leadership development as well. So really passionate about empowering students to navigate their worlds and make good high character decisions. So that is my quick background. A little more about the Social Institute, where I'm talking to you from today. Our whole mission here at the Social Institute is to empower students and their role models to better navigate their social worlds. So social media, technology, AI, online and off, in those positive, high character ways to fuel future health, happiness, and success. And so what you see here is really zooming in on our approach. We really view ourselves as life skills for the modern day. We take a very proactive approach. We know students are already using AI. They will already be using social media. If they're not, they're going to, right? They'll use the technology. So we know that they will. Let's help empower and equip them to make good choices and understand how to do that, how to navigate that space well. A few other pieces here that I just want to highlight, themes that we'll come back to throughout the hour here. Student voice is at the forefront of everything that we do. I'll touch on that as we go through, but I want to just plug that here now. Thinking about your policies and your conversations, keeping that student voice at the forefront is going to be so key to our conversation today. And one other piece that I want to lean into here is that we take a full community approach when we work with schools, and you'll see that in the way that we talk about AI today. We want to equip your students, your families, and your educators all around these topics. We know so much happens at school, but so much also happens outside of school that trickles into the school day. So that full community approach is so key. And I mentioned that everything that we do keeps student voice at the forefront. What you see here is actually a quick screen grab of our student ambassador program. So everything that we do is vetted by students. Our student ambassador program is an opportunity for schools that we partner with. Every school has the opportunity to send students to meet with other students from around the country once a month. They get to talk about the latest trends, apps, experiences that they're having, and they also do our snicker tests. So they take a look at everything that we're working on, and if they laugh at us, we change it because we want to make sure that what we're talking about is actually relevant to students. So everything that you're about to see here today has all been vetted by students as well. So that's the background, my background, our company, and a little bit about what you're about to see here today. Digging into our agenda, we are going to touch on a few different areas here. So to start, we will touch on the state of AI in schools. Then we're going to move over to the challenges that students are experiencing. We'll talk about some strategies to bridge that gap, and then some next steps and resources. And I have some things for you to take away to your communities today. But to start, again, we're going to talk about that state of AI in schools. And so we know that educators are very split. I touched on that at the outset. We know that even though AI has a lot of potential benefits, not everybody feels the same about it. We know that there's this survey here from Education Week that found that 47% of teachers worry that AI could have negative impacts on teaching and learning over the next 5 years. We also know that there's a big part of this concern is that AI might make it easier for students to get answers without really learning. One high school teacher mentioned that students already have tons of resources for finding answers to tests and assignments, and AI is just making that easier. So that's a real concern that teachers have. But we also know that there's a lot of excitement about AI, especially from teachers who've seen how it can help their classrooms. And we're going to go over some examples of some of the uses that we're hearing about and benefits that AI has to offer that is helping with different instructors' teaching style and also addressing different student needs. So again, it's a mixed bag, but what are we seeing in the classroom? What are the trends that are impacting education? We know that 44% of teachers are using AI for research, right? So if you are not already, know that almost half of your colleagues probably are, as they're looking up different things to bring to the classroom. Another stat for you here, we know that 38% of teachers use AI for creating lesson plans. So they might be using something like ChatGPT to enter in a prompt and see what comes out. There are also a number of different tools that we'll check out here in a moment. But we know that there is that use for creating those plans. And a third stat for you here, 38% of teachers use AI for creating classroom materials in general. So this is already a tool that we see instructors really leaning into. What we're going to do now is dig into this just a little bit more. And so we're going to look at some popular AI tools that educators are already using. And each of these tools has different strengths and can support specific areas in teaching and learning. There's AI chatbots, AI for spreadsheets, image generation, slide decks, and more that are available for use. We're going to talk about ways to use different tools to help meet students' individual needs, but know that there are definitely unique features to each one. And on this mapping here, you'll see these different areas, but that instructional materials is what's highlighted right now. That's actually what we are going to dig into here. And then just to see a couple questions coming in through the chat, Arlen is going to share the recording via email, so you'll be able to grab this slide, all of these slides, and check out these each a little bit more. For now, as we take a closer look at instructional materials, and we're zooming in here again, you can see different categories, right? Lesson plan generation, study material generation. What I would love to do though is actually take to the chat, and if you've used any of these tools, what have you used? What are your favorites? What have you not enjoyed? What would you not recommend? I know that there's, again, a wide range of what we've used. Let's help each other find the right tools. If you've used any of these instructional materials or something that you're not seeing here, throw that in the chat, and I will just give you a moment to take a look and write that in there. Yep, Quizlet. I see someone has used, that's one yep, another person has used Quizlet. I hear about that one quite a bit. And as you're taking, okay, we explored, yep, ChatGPT at some workshop, listened to a presentation, Quizlet. Okay, they haven't signed an agreement. Yep, some Quizlet and Canva, ChatGPT and Gemini. ChatGPT and Quizlet. Yeah, ChatGPT and Quizlet seem to be the two that are the most popular here. Someone mentioned Quizlet not signing the SOPA agreement, and this is going to bring us to one of our topics later. But just as you're thinking about these different tools and what they have agreed to and what they have not agreed to, where their materials are coming from, what you're putting into them. So we'll come back to some of these pieces here as well. But awesome, really helpful always to see what different people are using and to share with colleagues. Again, we're going to do this one more time as we take back a look at this larger slide here. I want to take a look at assessment and feedback tools. Some things that we hear about our AI assisted grading, feedback on student work, again, different quiz generation, progress tracking. So again, take to the chat if you've used anything that you're seeing on this screen that you enjoyed, recommended, feel neutral about, don't like. Share with your colleagues here on what your experiences have been. And again, while you're writing in here, that feedback piece on student work, I've heard some instructors will have their students do an assignment and then take to something like ChatGPT, which I know is not listed on this one, but submit something for feedback and then actually engage with the AI tool to argue why they agree or disagree and have to defend their work. So some different creative ways to use this here. No red ink, Brisk, Magic School AI, couple of no red ink, Kahoot. Edpuzzle is useful. I don't like Kahoot as it's only multiple choice. Yeah, interesting. So this no red ink Kahoot Edpuzzle is showing up a bit here. Yeah, so if you haven't tried some of what your peers are writing in the chat, might be something interesting to explore. And again, you'll have access to this slide, so you can play around with other tools here as well. When you look at these slides, though, it can be almost overwhelming how much there is out there. And I know I was at a conference in the fall, and there were a group of educators talking about what they've been using, and really enjoyed hearing from one another, especially on free versions. There are paid versions of different AI tools as well, but a lot of the educators I was hearing from were talking about really taking your time to experiment and play around with the benefits of these different tools. So again, we know that this is already something that people are using. We've seen a number of people participate in the chat here to tell us about different experiences with AI so far. And we know that, again, educators are leveraging AI to boost not only their own efficiencies, but that student success. What we hear is that teachers love the ability to personalize learning. I've heard teachers who will take an assignment and use one of those tools to ask it to come up with different versions for students that might learn in different ways. They also love the automation of routine tasks and getting some of the real-time feedback. But there are some negatives and concerns too, and outside of what's listed here as well. Data privacy and security. I've had instructors tell me that they might use, again, something like ChatGPT if they have to write an email home and they might feel a little steamed about something that happened in the classroom. So they'll write the email, submit it to ChatGPT, ask it to make the tone more friendly, and then take that, maybe tweak it a little bit and send that home. One thing that I've is a good best practice though is instead of putting in the real details about that student, no real names, right? One instructor said that they just use the name John for every student. So, John was late to class today. John plagiarized. John did this. Really, we're talking about three different students, but we're always using the same name. So there's no student identifying information that you're putting into these tools. We can also think about being mindful of the digital divide, right? So if you're using this and others are not, how do we help people with that training and learning curve, getting the onboarding? When, how much time does it take to learn this before it actually does create more efficiency as opposed to more work on that end? But we've talked about the state of AI in schools. We see the different ways that instructors are using this. We know, again, all of the different ways that educators feel about this topic. Some, again, are all in. Some are really not interested. Either way, that's fine. Wherever you land, that's totally fine too. But next, we're going to talk about the student experience and specifically some of the challenges that our students are experiencing here. So the first thing I'm going to put up here, students are confused about AI policies. So you may be using this, but we want to think about what are we communicating in our schools and what are our students understanding to be the appropriate use of AI so far. 42% of students report that their school has rules around AI, but those rules aren't clear. And what we hear from students is things like this. I don't know when it's okay to use AI for assignments. Teachers have different rules and it's confusing. Or I'm afraid to ask about using AI because I might get in trouble, right? So when there's that lack of clarity, then the students don't raise their hand to ask because they're afraid that they've already messed up. And what that leads to is likely more getting into deeper trouble than if we had just asked the question, or if we had just been clear from the get-go. Again, teachers having different rules. We hear about this with cell phone policies as well. What goes in one classroom might be different in another one, and that can lead to some confusion as well. And if you are giving assignments, are you clear about whether or not students can use AI? What's a circumstance that's okay? What is a circumstance that is not, right? So our students are confused. And we also know that this is really pertinent and present, and we're seeing this in headlines all the time now. So some different school policies that we've seen in headlines about. Here you have one: U.S. judge rejects parents' bid to clear student's record over AI cheating allegation. We also saw that without clear AI policies, some Maryland students feel unfairly punished for cheating. And this last one here: lax New York City school cell phone policies put burden on teachers, leave students confused, right? So the clarity is so important, and the headlines here are all about when things are unclear and what's happening. And these are the stories that become newsworthy and hit that national stage. So as we think about this, what are the strategies now, right? We know what we're doing as educators. We know our students are feeling confused. How do we bridge the gap? And so here, we want to kick this off by setting the intention that school policies should empower and equip, not confuse and restrict. And so this calls right back to our approach that we talked about at the beginning of empowering students and equipping them to make good choices here. And so again, we're going to take to the chat here. I'm going to put a question up. And again, you'll get access to these tomorrow, but also you might take a picture of this if that's of interest, to bring some of these questions back to your communities. But we want to know what you're hearing. So how are students in your school responding to your AI policies? We might even take a step back and assess if you have a policy that you know about. Do you have a personal policy? What steps have you taken so far to clarify your approach to students, families, and educators? So in the chat, how are your students responding? Or any piece of this question, or if you even want to mention, that you're working on your policy, be great to get a pulse check on where the group is in this space so far. So again, I'll leave a moment for you to share. And if you don't want to share with everyone, you can always select to go to hosts and panelists, and I will keep it anonymous and just read out the general themes. Working on a district policy, and do you have one in your own classroom? Awesome. Yeah, I hear from English teachers specifically about this with idea generation and plagiarism concerns. No district policy, starting to work on one. Policies in progress, very small district. Yep, another person working on one. Beginning stages of teaching teachers how to use it. Yep, starting to work on a policy. So one thing that came up, again, I was speaking at a conference this fall, and we talked about AI for a moment. And in between one of the breaks, I had a group from one school come up to me and say that they had gone to ChatGPT and asked it to create an AI policy for their school. And they put in a couple specific nuances about their school community that they wanted it to capture, and it actually generated a pretty solid 4-page AI policy about ethical use. So I thought that was such a funny way to use AI to monitor AI. So that might be a good place to start too if you're trying to figure out where to go here. A few more things in the chat here. Working on our policy. Things are a little bit vague. Needs to be specifically indicated in class. Don't want to bring too much attention to it. Yep. And having some repeat of fear about cell phone bans and policies. Yeah, someone used ChatGPT to create one. Awesome. Yep. Okay. Somebody first offense, student conversation with teacher and parent. Awesome. So as you're thinking about this, and it's great to see, we're sort of running the range here on where we are with this. And I would say that when I talk to schools, that's very typical. A lot of schools are writing a policy, editing a policy, trying to figure it out. And somebody also mentioned too that just starting to really teach their teachers and educators how to use this themselves, right? And so there's definitely that piece to it as well. Having the education on what it is and how it works, but then also understanding how students will use it, and then also having that policy piece. So a lot of steps to this here. When we're thinking about these policies, we want to think again, you'll hear me say being unclear is tough in this space. As you know, with all policies, clarity is so important, right? And so impact of unclear policies on AI, but you could really insert anything in here. Unclear policies around the use of AI or other tech in schools leads to violations, right? As we saw in those articles, sometimes it's even confusing and students don't feel like they've done anything wrong. But often these are unintended violations of academic integrity, can lead to missed opportunities, not only for students to participate, right? If they're being held out of things for that, the disciplinary action, but also missed opportunities to teach that responsible and ethical use of AI. And if you again zoom out, ethical and responsible use of emerging technologies in general, right, as our students go off into the world and technology continues to expand. And last but not least, your frustration. Students are confused and your educators are frustrated. And so we want to bring as much clarity as possible to our policies. So wherever you are in that process of creation, we want to keep the idea of clarity at the forefront. Another question here that can be a great conversation starter with your faculty and staff. How does clarity or lack thereof in policies affect trust in your school community? And again, I know that there's a lot of split on this topic in general about use and whether or not students should be using it and all of the different questions here. This can be a really great grounding question to bring to the table. Whether you want to use it or not, whether you want your students to use it or not, what's the benefit of having clarity as far as policies go in your community? Why aren't policies clear? Sometimes they're written for adults, right? So we're all, we're faculty in a room, we're writing this out, we send it out to the students. It just might not resonate. They may not really be understanding what you're driving at. Inconsistent enforcement across classrooms. Again, we see this often with cell phone policies as well, but we want to make sure that everybody is on the same page and enforcing the same minimum standards here. And then rapid evolution of AI tools that outpace policy updates. Again, this can be a real challenge, right? So you might come up with the great policy today and tomorrow another tool comes out. Is there room in there for this to be a living policy? And that's something we want to think about as well. And so we can turn these challenges into an opportunity here. Again, 3 different areas that will all overlap with that school mission. But for the AI policy, we want to recognize the benefits of using AI ethically. And we can communicate those out, understanding what plagiarism is in the context of AI. A lot of times what we hear from students is that they think that they're just gathering some ideas, but how do they then take some ideas and turn those into their own writing and their own prompts and not take something and have that be plagiarism. Fostering creativity, but never do actual work. Again, when I was younger, I used to really like to draw. I would take to Google and ask it for drawing prompts, and you would get a page from an art professor at a school that put something on early Google, and that's what you would take. Now you can go to, again, something like ChatGPT. You can tell the one that I'm the most familiar with, and go in and ask it for a prompt, and then you can say more specific, or you can give it more prompts to get more ideas out of there. So how do we foster creativity in those same ways, but not have it actually do the work for us? And then we can also want to make sure that we're addressing the inherent biases within AI. AI knows what's been put into it. And so there are biases that occur. And so we want to make sure that our policies are reflecting that and commenting on that as well. Looking over at the digital literacy piece, we're encouraging positive and responsible tech use, evaluating sources and checking for misinformation, right? So just because it comes out of something that's AI doesn't mean that it's necessarily right. Again, at that same conference where I had instructors coming up with their AI policy using ChatGPT, another group asked it for information about some of its teachers. And while it had a really good, accurate summary of one of its instructors, it couldn't find anything to report on their head of school. And when they prompted it again, it actually said that someone else had taken the role of head of school and was taking the school in a radically different direction. And essentially, if you've seen things about AI and ChatGPT hallucinating, that's an example of that happening in real time at a conference right in front of me. So we want to make sure that we're also teaching and evaluating that misinformation component. Thinking about protecting your privacy, we talked about this. What are we feeding in our prompts, and making sure that we're protecting privacy in any of our prompts that we're putting in, or any information that we're feeding, and then creative and respectful communication. And then the last piece here in the middle, that school mission, we're thinking about creating future-ready students, right? We want to help them to be able to navigate not only this, but what this evolves into, equipping students with those life skills for the modern day, fostering those critical thinking skills, and encouraging academic integrity, right? So I'm going to put this quote up here. This is something that we say here at the Social Institute all the time, clear is kind, right? And so the more clear we can be about these policies, the more we're going to avoid those headlines that we saw, and we're going to avoid chasing down those disciplinary issues. We also want to think about making our AI policies student friendly, simplifying language. We talked about some of the things that make things unclear. If this feels like it's written for adults and not your students, simplifying the language to use terms students understand. Again, you could actually use different AI tools to ask it to take your policy and make sure that it fits that audience. We want to provide examples as well. This is a new space, not only for your students, but again, someone mentioned it, for your teachers. So including scenarios of acceptable and unacceptable use is going to be really helpful as you have this policy and these conversations. Having consistency across classrooms, another key here. We want to make sure that we're aligning teacher guidelines to avoid confusion as the students go from class to class and assignment to assignment. And then, of course, engaging students in policy creation. I mentioned at the beginning that student voice is so critical when we're talking about these topics. And so gathering feedback during development of your policies can be really helpful. And your students are often very eager to display to you that they are the subject matter expert on all things technology. So if you ask them about how are they using AI, what do they think about it, more often than not, they're very excited to tell you about it. And that can be really helpful as you then take that information and apply it to editing and creating those policies. Another question for you here. Have you engaged or considered engaging students in creating or reviewing AI policies, and how might this improve understanding and buy-in? So I'm going to give us a moment to get back to the chat on this one, and you can answer either or both. Have you talked to students about AI, and where is their level of buy-in now, and how do you think that might affect it? So any component of those questions, feel free to take to the chat. I'll give everybody a moment there. Sure. Someone said that they have not done this yet, but definitely should include the students. Yep. Someone else commented students are usually a step ahead. That is true. So it's good to engage them in the development of these. Okay. We had talked about this with students in the sense of plagiarism. We've discussed how to use it effectively, but I don't think students have really engaged with this. Students need to be part of the decision-making process, both in and outside of the community. Yep. Community members should also be engaged in the conversations regarding AI. Yep, talked about it, but not necessarily on policy. Yeah, this is great. Thank you. I'm really appreciating hearing this. And yeah, another thing, engaging the students. Teachers feel so behind in understanding how to use it that they don't feel like there's a clear question to ask. That is a great point. And I do hear a lot of things from teachers trying to wrap their heads around this. Even one thing that I would say to that last comment here about what's the clear question to ask. Even just asking how the students are using it, what they think of it, what they like, right? Even thinking about when we put up the different options of AI tools at the beginning and asked what everyone had used, it can be really interesting to do something like that with students and just ask them what they've discussed around AI, what tools they've used. And again, they're usually pretty excited to tell you. The adults in their lives often don't ask about social media, AI, right? Unless it's somebody's already gotten in trouble. And so even just asking the question of what they're using and how they're using it and what they like can be really interesting as a jumping point to create some safety to those conversations as well. Awesome. Thank you. This again, hopefully this is helpful for everyone else to see here where everyone is. It seems like this group very much so in a similar spot here where we're creating policies, we're thinking about ways to engage students, but haven't necessarily done that yet. So as we think about making AI policies student friendly, a few different pieces here that we can think about. And again, there's so much that goes into your school day. Oh, great. Someone just said that they're starting council and ambassadors to review and have a true collaboration. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. As we think about making these policies student friendly, we can think about all of the different buckets throughout the day, and we'll just highlight a few here. The first thing here, reviewing policies in regular student assemblies or advisory sessions. Again, someone just commented having a student council and student ambassadors review. So that can be one great area to review this with students or with a specific cohort of students to keep that conversation flowing. Another thing that we can do is use school newsletters and websites for updates. So again, someone else mentioned that the full community needs to be engaged, and that's absolutely true. So communicating out those policies to families, again, your students are going to be very savvy with these tools. Your teachers are learning how to use these different tools, but the families of your students are not always as caught up just because they're not in that environment. And so keeping them in the loop with newsletters and websites so that they can know what the policies are and also know that this is something that's top of mind in schools right now it can be really helpful tying those threads together. A third thing here that we can think about is incorporating AI policy discussions into digital citizenship lessons. And so if you're having these conversations about good use of tech with your students, this can be an easy tie-in into a pre-existing slot or area during the day. And then the last piece here, engaging families in understanding and supporting policies and workshops. So again, different layers and levels of intensity on training and onboarding. But once you have your policy, your teachers feel comfortable, your students are learning these lessons, getting families in on workshops and really helping them to deep dive and understand can be also really key to keeping everyone on the same page. But of course, we want to make sure that we're keeping policies relevant. You can see the wheel on the right. We're staying ahead of AI trends. We want to review and adapt policy as AI evolves. Stay ahead, right? Keep that wheel going so that we can have clear policies that everyone is on board with. How are we doing this, right? Where we're going to regularly review and adapt policies as AI evolves. We want to think about this as a living policy for a changing landscape and for new technologies that are coming out. You can also continue to ask for feedback from students and teachers, right? You might walk away from today, you might go make a policy, put that in action, and 3 months from now decide that there's something that's missing. That's totally okay. I think going into making that policy, knowing that it's going to be an evolving and a living policy is really important to the success of it. And you can even communicate that out as well. And again, we want to monitor AI trends to stay ahead of potential changes. And so we've talked about the state of AI in schools. We touched on those challenges that students are experiencing, the strategies to bridge the gap. Now we're going to dig into some resources. So what I'm going to do here in a moment is do what you probably never do in the classroom and ask you to take out your phones if you have them, because I have a few resources for you to grab here. Your next steps as you walk away from today, of course, is to review your current AI policy for clarity and student understanding. So again, if you don't have one yet, and it sounds like a lot of us are writing it, we want to go to that policy creation with an eye, again, for clarity and for making sure that it's really clear for your students specifically. We also want to make sure that we're scheduling student focus groups to gather feedback. Again, whatever that looks like, whether that's that student council, whether that's gathering with your teachers first, and then having them reach the topic with their students. And we also want to develop a communication plan to clarify expectations. And again, that communication is not only to the teachers and to the students, but also to the families of your students. And again, that quick reminder here that your policies should empower and equip, not confuse and restrict students. Would you happen to have a general version to start off with? A general version of a policy? We are going to pop right over to here. This is one resource that's going to be really helpful. Classroom tech policy. This can be a great place to start, which kind of addresses that question, but we'll come back to it in just a moment here. So scan this QR code and you'll get this classroom technology policy that is great for your teachers to use in general. It covers everything, huddling with your students and brainstorming standards for tech in the classroom. So really helping to have the conversations on the front end, and again, being proactive so that everyone's on the same page. And Savannah just put that link in the chat too if you don't have your phone on you. Reinforcing an existing ban on phones or policy, empowering teachers to create their own classroom tech policy. So you can already use this as a sort of launching point as a framework for how we might start having some of those conversations, questions here that you're going to see if it's on your screen here. where should we store devices? When are we allowed to use devices for learning? What should happen if a student misuses their device? What digital tools and platforms will we need to access regularly? Can we charge our devices during class? If so, when? So back to the question of, do we have a general policy to start off with? This can actually be a nice framework to ask some questions about AI. So instead of thinking about cell phones specifically, we could think, when are you allowed to use AI for learning and when are you not to, right? What happens if you misuse AI? So just thinking about that as a jumping off point. The next thing here is a guide to spotting AI deepfakes. So another QR code that you are welcome to scan, and Savannah will likely be dropping that link into the chat here as well in just a moment. This is going to be a resource to help your students understand what a deepfake is. So this is where, especially last year, when students were really starting to use AI, it was with pictures and deepfake pictures, but we also saw this a lot on social media. And so understanding what a deepfake is, learning what students think about AI generated content, and you can also get a printable checklist that your students can use to spot deepfake content. And so again, here, we have that in the chat for you to grab. You can also scan that QR code. Another great resource as we're thinking about policies is a guide to cell phone policies. This resource helps you to understand the top insights of cell phone use among students, positive and negative moves students are making with cell phones, getting student buy-in on new cell phone policies. So again, thinking about making your AI policy, a lot of what we're talking about here, getting that student buy-in, that's going to tie right over. So these are great launching points for all of your policy creation, but specifically you can then think about how that pertains and relates to what you're working on with AI here. This last one here, this is the huddle. If you have joined us for a webinar before, you've heard me talk about this, but this is a great resource for your educators and your families. Again, the link is in the chat. You can also scan this QR code here. This is going to keep you up to date on all of the different trends that your students are likely seeing come across their feeds, different AI trends as well, social media, all the different technologies, keywords that might come up that might cue you into understanding what your students are talking about, especially, some trends are a little bit more benign. I think it was not this past holiday season, but the one prior, all of a sudden, families were very surprised that their 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds were asking for beauty and skincare products. And that's because TikTok was really aiming at that cohort for skincare products. And so that's what students were asking for the holidays. So we'll cue you into where that's coming from. There's also some scarier trends that will happen, and we'll also keep you in the loop on those as well. So the huddle is great resource, newsletter to sign up for. And then I do have one more QR code for you to scan here. This is your opportunity to give us some feedback directly to us here at the Social Institute. You get to give me a score and give me some feedback, help me to continue to improve our presentations. So I would really sincerely appreciate it if you were to scan that and give us some feedback here. And again, that survey link is in the chat as well. So I'll leave that up for just a moment. And then the last thing that I'll say, and then I'll leave it open to questions here, is we are talking about the Social Institute. We talk about social media, technology, AI. So I have to say, follow us on social. This is where you can follow along with us. This is also where we will provide different resources, alert you to additional webinars, and different things like that. So follow us on social, grab all those links that we threw in there. And I am going to hang out here. If you have questions you want to throw in the chat, please share them. I'm happy to answer anything that is still on your mind.
Wonderful, Lauren. Thank you so much for that awesome presentation. Love all the policy considerations you shared and all the tools. Really appreciate the idea of a student focus group. That's something I hadn't considered before. So hopefully people will take that into considerations as they're drafting these policies. Again, we've got plenty of time for questions directly for Lauren or Savannah at the Social Institute. So if you want to pop those into chat, thank you, Susan. Appreciate that. And again, use those links that Savannah posted in there to get access to those resources. I'll be sending out a link to the PowerPoint presentation if Lauren, if you're comfortable sharing that. I know some presenters like to keep that stuff a little closer to home. But tomorrow I'll be sending out a link to the recording, the evaluation, and the PowerPoint maybe as a PDF or something, however you'd like to give that.
I can send the PDF to this afternoon for you, so you
Okay,
have that one
perfect.
as
Thank you, Savannah.
well.
That'd be great.
I also wanted to quickly mention, so I actually work on creating the Huddle newsletter, and it's twice a month, so nothing crazy in your inbox, but trying to really hone in on student trends and things that are impactful for educators and administrators. And no one likes to get too much in your inbox, but it's really valuable information to know what's going on with education trends with students and things you maybe have not considered. I learn something new every time we create it, actually. So highly recommend if yeah, there's always some hesitancy of like, oh, signing up for another email, but this one's great and it's just twice a month. So would recommend.
Yes, very good. Thank you for sharing the link to that. Oh yeah, Bridget working on AI and cell phone policies at the same time. Love it. Well, this is probably
Nice.
very helpful for that.
Thank you. I appreciate the comments that people are making here. That's awesome. Yeah, that last one, that continuing to learn and grow in this new AI, I think that's so key. I think that's where we all are, is just as these different things come out, just having an open mind, to give things a try, see what works for you, what doesn't, and yeah, having that growth mindset is always so key, I think. So thank you for sharing that. But I guess I'll just say too, if any questions do come up later as you're thinking about this, please feel free to reach out, uh, anytime. If you get the recording, you'll also see my email is in there as well. So um, always happy to have a conversation. Okay, we have more and more instances of students using, oh, thank you, Savannah, of students using AI for cheating because they feel like they can outsmart the teachers. Are there good ways to identify it? So that's a question that has been coming up a lot. I know when it came to plagiarism, before all of the AI tools, a lot of educators would use something like Turnitin. And what we're finding is that it's a little bit harder right now to identify using a tool. There are some out there, but some interesting things that you can track on as well are different sort of turns of language that tend to come from different AI tools. So I saw a paper recently, and I have to think about where it was, but about science articles, and they were finding that when students were using the word delve, so we're going to delve deeper. Delve was a tell that they had used AI, because that's just like a common turn of phrase. And so there are some articles that are coming out about what are the linguistic sort of like things that something like ChatGPT or these different tools will lead to, that can flag that this might be something to dig deeper into. But it is definitely a challenge. I think another thing that I've been hearing about, there are apps for math now. So a student can take a picture of a math problem, put it into an AI, a math app, and it will give the answer. And so that's where, when you're thinking about the policies and ways to identify it, sometimes, I mean, when it comes to math, if it's the right answer, it's the right answer. Going back to thinking about how do we have students show their thought process? How do we have students show their work? Having clear guidelines of, is this an assignment where you can use this or not? And if it is not, finding ways to outline within an assignment, again, that process of thinking through. So again, if it's math, you can ask them to show their work, of course. If it's something like a paper, mapping out where the idea came from, how they sort of evolved with it. Another thing that I've heard students or teachers do rather is they might add a little bit more of a presentation opportunity to have students really speak on a topic that they wrote a paper on, but then of course be asked additional questions that if they had truly done the work on it, then they would be able to answer that. So some different ways to change assignments to help grab this. Someone said GPT has an invisible watermark due to ownership of materials being generated. So if you were to generate something with ChatGPT, but then type it separately, that's one way that students get around it. It just depends on how the students are grabbing different content out of there. Yes, policy is forever changing and updated as technology progresses. Yeah, for sure. I think, and I think that's comes back to just making sure that at the outset, when you're having these conversations, be clear about that piece too, right? Your teachers will get frustrated if they feel like the target is moving all the time. But if you're upfront with them that we're going to make this a living policy and adjust as needed, then that will at least keep everyone on the same page. Same with your students, right? If you let them know, listen, this is something that will continue to evolve and we will communicate that with you as it continues to, then you're covering yourself and also keeping that conversation open. Different policy for different subjects, math versus English versus science, for example. I think that that's a great question. I think that what I would suggest is when you're having those conversations with your teachers and getting their take, even asking them what are they seeing so far can be really helpful to understand if there's a need for that or not. But what I think we tend to see with schools is there's an overarching policy, and then if within the classroom, if there's something that needs to be specifically identified for a subject, then that's something that you can support those individual instructors on as well. These are great questions. Another policy that I've heard teachers use that may be helpful too is thinking about the traffic lights. So green, yellow, red. So green, if an assignment has a green on the top of the assignment, then all in on AI. You can use AI to do whatever you need to do to get this done. Yellow is using AI, but with certain restrictions, and you can define what those are. And then red is none. So the expectation is that you're doing this without the assistance of artificial intelligence. And so that can be a really helpful way to think about the nuance to some of this as well. When are we teaching them how to use this as a good tool? And when are we expecting just very specific, specific student work? Yep, making it really clear.
Laura, did you see Leslie's question about thoughts on AI and SOPA policies?
I'm just seeing that one now. I actually don't. I don't have much to comment on that one right now, but I would love to connect again on that one and get back to you on sort of where our company conversations are about that. Savannah, do you have anything to add there?
I'm pretty unfamiliar with the SOPA policy, so can't add much there, but definitely something to circle back on, and I'll add Lauren's emails in the comments, so send her an email, please.
All right, well, I don't see anything else coming in. Thanks, Leslie, appreciate that. Lauren, Savannah, I want to thank you both so much for your time and your expertise on this topic. Always so great to partner with the Social Institute on these webinars. I always look forward to these coming up in the afternoon. So hopefully we'll get something else, if we don't already have something else scheduled for the spring, get something on the calendar with you all as well. Thanks to our participants. Thanks to you all for logging in early to make this a really smooth session, and your participation in chat and your great questions here at the end. It's been terrific. We can bring the webinar to a close, and if you'd like to click on the leave button, hover in the lower right of your Zoom control panel, there'll be a big red leave button. You are free to log out of the session, and I'll be following up with the recording tomorrow morning. Thanks, everyone. Great question. How do you get credit? You will complete the evaluation that I'll email tomorrow morning. And at the end of the evaluation, after you hit submit, you'll be able to download the ISB evidence of completion form for 1 PD clock hour, and the provider will be the Illinois Principals Association. Thanks, Kyle.